I represented myself in a tax court of Canada hearing, and my husband's $300 an hour lawyer actually laughed out loud. She can't even afford an articling student, my husband said, loud enough for the gallery to hear, and the whole room seemed to agree with him. Then the presiding judge took off her glasses, looked straight at his lawyer, and said, "Counsel, you don't recognize her?" I watched the color drain right out of my husband's face while the courtroom went dead quiet. My name is In, I'm 31, and for 4 years I let my husband believe I was a part-time bookkeeper making $42,000 a year out of our condo in Mississauga. He thought I was a quiet woman who reconciled invoices for a couple of small businesses and kept out of his way. He had no idea I was a chartered professional accountant and a forensic investigator contracted to the Canada Revenue Agency's Criminal Investigations Program. Before I tell you exactly how I took his entire life apart, drop a comment and let me know which province or city you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up to someone who badly underestimated what you were worth. It didn't start with shouting. It started on a grey, sleeting Tuesday in late November, the kind of Toronto evening where the slush soaks through your boots before you've crossed the parking lot. It was our 4th anniversary. I'd left work early and gone all the way down to the distillery district to pick up a bottle of ice wine he'd been going on about for months. And I came up in the elevator with my coat dripping and my chest warm, thinking we'd order from the Thai place and actually talk for once. I unlocked the door and the first thing that hit me wasn't dinner. It was the smell of garbage bags. Cheap, black ones, 3 of them, slumped in the middle of the living room on the rug I'd spent a whole weekend choosing. One had split and I could see the sleeve of my good winter parka spilling out the side. My husband was on the sofa with a glass of scotch, one leg crossed over the other, completely calm. He was wearing the charcoal suit he wore for closings at the firm. He looked at me the way he'd look at a line item that didn't reconcile. "You're early," he said. I just stared at the bags. "What is this? What are my things doing in garbage bags?" "It's our anniversary." He took a slow sip and set the glass down on the coffee table, next to a thick folder clipped shut. He tossed the folder across so it landed at my feet. "Those are the separation papers. I've already signed my part. I need yours tonight. Don't bother reading the division of property. My lawyer made it airtight. You leave with what you came in with, which is more or less nothing." I didn't move. The bottle of ice wine was getting heavy in my hand. "You're separating from me on our anniversary." He laughed, short and dry. "There's no good day for this, Inwin. Let's not turn it into a scene. I'm moving in a different direction with my life, and you don't fit it anymore." He stood, walked around the table, and looked me up and down. "Look at you. I'm about to make partner at one of the biggest firms on Bay Street. I go to dinners, fundraisers, board things. The other guys have wives who do something. And you sit here in a hoodie typing numbers into a spreadsheet for what? 42 grand a year? You're a glorified data entry clerk." I let him keep going. For 4 years, I'd kept my real work buried so deep that even my own mother thought I just did some bookkeeping from home. I'd sat through his lectures about tax loopholes he set up for clients, nodding like I didn't understand a word, when I'd spent my days unwinding offshore structures exactly like the ones he bragged about. "You're boring," he said. "No drive, no ambition. I need someone who operates on my level." I looked at the garbage bags holding clothes I'd worn while quietly paying half the mortgage on that condo, money I'd routed through a trust so he could keep playing the sole provider. A lesser version of me would have tried, but the part of my brain that hunted white-collar fraud for a living just clicked over into something cold and clear. "I need you out by midnight," he added, checking his watch. "Leave your fob on the counter." That's when I heard footsteps on the stairs. A woman came down, trailing her hand along the railing like she already owned the place. Late 20s, blonde, expensive everything. And she was wearing my robe, the silk one I'd had made on a trip I told him was a boring continuing education seminar. "This is the new associate from my firm," he said. And I noticed he didn't even say her name like it mattered. He put his arm around her. We've been seeing each other since the spring. She understands the world I move in. She gave me a tight, pitying little smile. I know this is hard, she said in a voice dripping with fake sympathy, but you have to be realistic. He and I are building something that requires a certain standard. You two were never really compatible. She glanced at the bags. Honestly, you should just sign tonight and go quietly. Don't waste your money on a lawyer. A decent family lawyer in this city wants a $15,000 retainer just to open a file. You make what, 40,000? You can't afford to fight us. You can't even afford to walk into a firm like mine. It was almost funny. She was standing in my home in my robe, lecturing me about money based on a tax return I'd built myself to keep my husband in the dark. It gets worse, he said, and held up his phone. Our joint account. The balance read zero. I moved everything to my own account this morning, took your name off the cards, froze the joint line of credit. You've got whatever's in your wallet. I kept my voice flat. You emptied our accounts. You shut off my cards. I'm protecting my assets. I built this. You contributed grocery money. He gestured at the condo, the floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the lake. And before you ask about the place, you remember all that paperwork at closing. You signed wherever the lawyer pointed. Your 80,000 went in as a gift toward the purchase, not equity. The title's in my name. The mortgage is in my name. You've got no claim here. I let the silence sit. I knew exactly what I'd signed 4 years ago. I'd let him put the unit in his name on his own insistence to keep it clean of any connection to my files. He thought he'd outsmarted me with a real estate move. He had no idea that by claiming sole ownership, he'd just claimed sole responsibility for a property I'd quietly tied to a CRA lien through a numbered company. But I needed him to feel like he'd won. So I let my shoulders drop and made my voice wobble. So you're throwing me out into the sleet. No money, no cards, nowhere to go. Call one of your little bookkeeping friends and crash on a couch, he said. Or find a cheap motel out by the airport. I don't care. I want you gone by midnight. He shoved the folder against my chest. I took it. I didn't throw it back. I walked over to the bags, reached behind them, and grabbed the one plain black case I always kept packed, the one he assumed was old coats. Inside were my encrypted drives, my security tokens, the backup credentials for my federal clearance. I pulled up my hood, took the handle, and walked out without a word. The second the elevator doors closed, my whole body changed. The slump went out of my shoulders. I rolled my neck and let the cold focus settle over me. My husband genuinely believed he'd just executed a clean asset protection play. He had no idea he'd handed a loaded file to a forensic accountant who took apart structures like his before her morning coffee. I came out onto the street into the freezing rain and walked, dragging the case along the wet pavement until I reached the shelter of a parking garage where the building cameras couldn't see me. I knelt by the case, unzipped the hidden lining, and pulled out a black phone, fully encrypted, issued by my unit. He thought he'd cut my only line to the world an hour ago. He didn't know this one existed. I pressed my thumb to the scanner, typed the passcode, and dialed a secure line. It rang twice. Evening, said my senior analyst. He worked out of a quiet office tower up by the lake with the best people on our team. Are you secure? I'm secure. I need you to open a full forensic file. Subject's my husband. I gave him the name. Pull every transaction over the last 4 years. The personal corporation, the consulting invoices, anything routed offshore. I want the wire transfers through the Caymans mapped, the metadata of his work email, the whole picture. He's been bragging to clients about structures for years. Let's see his own. I heard him start typing. Do we loop in the crown yet? Not yet. We gather everything first. He just signed papers claiming every asset as his own to keep them from me. He thinks he's protecting his money. What he actually did was take sole legal responsibility for whatever's hiding in those structures. Let him get comfortable. The clock starts now. I hung up, slid the phone away, and ordered a cab to a downtown loft he knew nothing about. Watching the wet street lights blur past the window, I already understood that he'd made his fatal mistake when he brought that associate down the stairs. She wasn't just his girlfriend. She was his legal cover, the one drafting the consulting agreements that let dirty money move under the shield of solicitor-client privilege. She thought a law degree made her untouchable. She had no idea my unit pierced that privilege the moment fraud was on the table. 4 days passed before I had to step back into their orbit, and only because he'd kept the one thing I actually wanted. A small silver locket, the only thing I had left from my mother before I went into care as a kid. He knew what it meant, which meant he knew I'd come back for it. His mother hosted a mandatory Sunday dinner every week, a ritual built entirely to feed her own ego, and that's where he told me to come get it. I drove my 5-year-old Honda up the long driveway of her house in Oakville, past a row of German cars, and parked at the edge near the road. The housekeeper let me in, eyes already sliding away from me, and the smell of roast and expensive perfume rolled down the hall. I didn't take off my coat. I walked toward the laughter. The whole family was at the long table. My husband's older brother was already pouring himself a second heavy whiskey, phone buzzing non-stop beside his plate. A tell my team had already connected to gambling debts. Next to him sat his wife, a sharp, observant woman in a deep green dress, who was the only genuinely intelligent person in that family, and who was watching the room like she was counting cards. At the head sat my mother-in-law, 60, dripping in jewelry, bought with her late husband's money, her face pulled tight. And in the chair that had been mine for 4 years sat the associate, sipping wine, looking very pleased with herself. The laughter died the second my boots hit the hardwood. My mother-in-law set down her glass with a sharp click. She didn't offer me a chair. She looked at my plain grey cardigan and said, "He didn't invite you for your trinket. I did. I wanted you to see what a proper partner for my son looks like before you embarrass yourself dragging this out." She gestured grandly at the associate. "She's a rising lawyer. She comes from a respectable family. We spent 4 years trying to make something of you. You can't turn a stray into a show dog." I stood still and let it land. I catalogued every word. "You grew up bouncing through foster homes with nothing," she went on, getting nastier. "No pedigree, no ambition. You bring zero value to this family. You were a charity case my son felt sorry for. He's making partner now. This family needs a real lawyer, not some little bookkeeper." She slammed her palm on the table. I wasn't looking at her. I was looking at the brother's wife. She hadn't touched her food. Her hands were knotted in the napkin in her lap, knuckles white. She was the only one not laughing. She understood that cornering someone with nothing left to lose is a mistake. I turned back to my mother-in-law and gave her a slow, calm smile that made hers flicker. "You're right," I said quietly. "This family is going to need a very good lawyer, very soon." Then I held my hand out to my husband. The locket. He looked unsettled for a second, then pulled the tarnished chain out of his pocket and tossed it across the table. It slid and stopped at the edge. I picked it up, closed it in my palm, and turned to leave. I'd taken 2 steps when the brother stepped into my path, reeking of whiskey, and snatched the locket right out of my hand, dangling it over my head. "Not so fast," he slurred. "You waltz in here, insult my mother, and expect to leave with your dignity? I saw that rust bucket you parked by the road." "You're a joke." The table laughed. "If we're so tough, take my brother to court. Go on, see how far 40 grand gets you against a Bay Street firm." I kept my eyes level, not on the locket, just calculating how the words "the theft" and "coercion" would read in a statement later. My husband stood, picked up a full glass of red, walked over, and without a flicker of hesitation dipped it down the front of my cardigan. The cold wine soaked through to my skin. The room erupted. I didn't gasp. I didn't wipe it. I let it drip onto the floor. The associate walked over with a single page and a pen. "This is a waiver of all marital claims," she said crisply. "Alimony, support, equity in the condo. Completely binding. He had me drafted this morning." My husband took the locket from his brother and dangled it in my face. "Sign it and I give you back your little piece of junk." Refuse and it goes down the disposal tonight. Your choice. I looked at the page. Signing a legal waiver while covered in spilled wine, surrounded by hostile people, under threat of property destruction, is the textbook definition of duress. Any judge in the country would throw it out in 30 seconds. It was worthless, but they were too high on themselves to see it. I took the pen and signed in one smooth motion. He didn't hand me the locket. He dropped it on the floor by my wet shoes. Good girl, he said, turning his back. Now get out before you stain the rug. I bent, picked it up, and as I rose, my eyes met the brother's wife's. Her knuckles were white, her eyes blazing. She gave me the smallest nod. The alliance was made before either of us said a word. I barely reached the front hall when a crash came from the dining room, a water pitcher going over, ice cascading into the brother's lap. He jumped up swearing. In the chaos, she stumbled into me, gripped my wine-soaked sleeve, and announced loudly, "I'm so clumsy. Let me help you get that out. The kitchen has club soda. Come with me right now." Before anyone could object, she had me through the swinging doors into the empty kitchen. The instant the doors shut, the clumsy act dropped. She turned on the cold tap, shoved a cloth in my hands, and lowered her voice. "I know you only signed that garbage to get your locket back. But listen to me. Don't you dare sign anything in front of a real judge. Don't let them bully you into a quick settlement." I wiped at my blouse and waited. "They're bleeding you on purpose," she whispered, "and they're moving money faster than you'd believe. I work from home a couple days a week and I see everything. Last week, my husband took in courier packages here at his mother's house instead of his office to keep them off any worklog. I saw the return addresses before he shredded the envelopes. Cayman Islands. My pulse did one slow, deliberate beat. The Caymans. I'd already had my team chasing his international routing numbers, but physical couriers to a residential address was a gift. It meant arrogance. It meant a paper trail. "They're hiding real assets," she went on, shaking with quiet rage. "He and that associate are setting up shell companies. My husband helps route the paperwork because he owes serious money to bookies. They want you out with nothing while they sit on a fortune." "Why tell me?" I asked. "You're married to his brother. If they go down, he goes down." She let out a bitter little laugh. "He's already drained my savings for his Rosses and things I haven't noticed. This family is a sinking ship, and they treat anyone not born into it like cargo. I want out, and I can see you're smarter than you let them think. You're planning something." She paused. "There's a biometric safe behind the bookcase in my mother-in-law's study. I don't have the code, but I know when he opens it, he thinks no one in this house is clever enough to care." I dropped the cloth on the counter. "Arrogance breeds mistakes," I said. "Thank you for the water." She nodded once, rearranged her face into the dutiful sister-in-law, and pushed the doors open. I walked straight out the front and into the rain, and in the car I pulled out my secure phone. The Cayman link was confirmed. The safe was located. I gave the order to map the entire network and drill off into the dark with the pieces sliding into place. The morning after, I was back behind the glass desk in my actual office, 40-some floors up over the financial district, screens full of offshore banking data cross-referenced against those Cayman routing numbers. A red light blinked on my console. My chief of staff stepped in, a former RCMP financial crimes investigator with a dry sense of humor. "We've got a call coming in on the cover line," she said. "It's verified as your husband. He's routed it to the main number of your bookkeeping cover company." The cover was a sleepy little firm that supposedly did data entry for mid-tier clients, the perfect dull explanation for my salary and my flexible hours. He'd clearly looked them up that morning, hunting for HR. I smiled. He wasn't satisfied with the wine and the garbage bags. He wanted to make sure I had nothing left to fight him with. "Put him on speaker," I said. "Answer as HR. Let's see how far he'll go." She cleared her throat, shifted into a stressed mid-level manager's voice. "Good afternoon. How can I help you?" His smooth closing deal voice filled the office. "Good afternoon. I'm a partner track lawyer here in the city, and I'm calling about one of your bookkeepers. He gave my name. I felt a moral obligation to warn you before you're exposed to liability. We're going through a difficult separation, and my counsel uncovered that she's been siphoning money from my accounts. She's got a serious gambling problem. Given she handles sensitive financial data for you, I couldn't in good conscience stay quiet. A desperate woman will sell client information. It was a masterclass in projection. He was accusing me of the exact crimes he was committing. I muted my mic and looked at her through the glass. Give him what he wants. Fire me. Make him feel like a god. She gasped into the phone. Oh my goodness, this is a serious breach. We have zero tolerance. I'm horrified. But I'm so grateful you called. We'll terminate her access within the hour. You're protecting your business, he said warmly. She's unstable. Thank you so much, sir. You may have saved this company. The line clicked dead. The whole floor, who'd been listening on the internal feed, let out a quiet, icy laugh. My husband had just bullied a fake HR manager into firing his wife from a job that didn't exist, and he felt invincible. 10 minutes later, the burner on my desk buzzed. A text from him. Heard the sad news about your little bookkeeping gig. Such a shame. Unemployed, no money, nowhere to go. Good luck finding a shelter bed tonight. You're nothing without me. Don't bother begging for a settlement. I didn't reply. Silence is the most frightening thing in the world to a man who needs a reaction. I turned back to the wall of screens where the Cayman structures were finishing their decryption, shell companies popping up with timestamps and signatures, while he sat across the city thinking he'd buried me. A week later, I walked into the glass lobby of his firm exactly on time, wearing the same grey cardigan from the dinner, washed but visibly worn, scuffed flats, a cheap canvas tote. I needed to look like a woman who'd been sleeping on a friend's couch. The receptionist directed me to a boardroom on a high floor with a vertigo view of the lake. My husband sat across the table, relaxed in a navy suit. The associate sat beside him with a tablet and a smug little smile. At the head sat the senior partner, a man whose reputation for grinding spouses into dust in big money separations was practically a brand. He wore a watch worth more than my supposed yearly salary and looked at me like a parking ticket. You've brought no counsel, he said, not offering a seat. I sat slowly, hands clasped to hide how steady they were. I can't afford a lawyer right now, I said, small and brittle. He froze everything, and I lost my job. I just want this resolved fairly. My husband chuckled. The partner slid a single page across. Fair is subjective, he said, but my client is generous. Despite the fact that you contributed essentially nothing to this marriage, he'll offer you a one-time payment of $10,000. Think of it as a courtesy to help you find a small apartment and get back on your feet. I let my eyes go wide. He'd moved $4 million through a shell company the day before, and he was offering me 10 grand, taxable. But I put 80,000 of my own savings into the down payment, I said, panic creeping into my voice. The associate leaned in, eager to impress her senior. That was legally a gift under the addendum you signed. If you take him to court, you'll be destroyed. Do you have any idea what discovery costs? You're looking at a $25,000 retainer just to get a family lawyer to call you back. We'll counterclaim for our fees. You'll walk out owing hundreds of thousands. You'll be paying off this divorce for the rest of your life. I sat in silence and let them barrage me. Every threat was a textbook duress tactic, betting entirely on my ignorance, gaslighting me about how the system worked to force a fast signature. The partner was risking his entire career running a mediation this coercive. Take the 10,000, my husband said, inspecting his nails. Sign and disappear. Fight me and I'll ruin you so completely you'll regret the day we met. I let a single tear fall onto the table, reached into my tote, and pulled out a plain ballpoint. I let my hand shake. They all leaned forward. Then I let the pen slip from my fingers and clatter onto the table, buried my face in my hands, and let my shoulders heave with loud, ragged sobs. It was a flawless performance, every ounce of a hard week poured into it. For God's sake, my husband groaned. Pull yourself together. Emotional displays don't increase the offer, the partner said, bored. I pulled out a crumpled tissue, dabbed my eyes, and whispered, I'll sign. I'll take it and disappear today. But I need one thing first. Just for my own peace of mind. I reached into the tote and slid a single page across the table, printed on cheap paper to look like something downloaded at a library. It's just a standard disclosure form. I need to know my whole marriage wasn't a financial lie. I need you to swear in writing that you haven't hidden any other money from me. No secret accounts. If you sign this proving you're telling the truth, I'll sign your settlement right now. The partner snatched it up, scanned it, and his jaw tightened. My client is under no obligation to sign a document drafted by an unrepresented party. We won't be signing this. But my husband wasn't looking at his lawyer. He was looking at the broken woman who just needed one tiny, meaningless concession to vanish from his life. Let me see it, he said, and grabbed it out of the partner's hand. It's a generic form off the internet. She thinks I'm hiding treasure in the backyard. He laughed. If signing this gets her out of my life today, I'm signing it. I strongly advise against signing anything we didn't draft, the partner warned low. Noted and ignored, he uncapped a heavy pen. It's just standard language, the associate confirmed, peering over his shoulder, desperate to look useful. It only affirms his disclosed assets. It has no teeth. They were too blinded by their own superiority to see it. The affidavit was a sworn statement signed under penalty of perjury in which he was about to swear to a federal authority that he had no other assets, deliberately omitting $4 million sitting in Cayman shells my team had already mapped and verified. The moment his pen touched the line, it stopped being a messy separation and became a documented crime. Fine, he said, reading the top line aloud and laughing. An affidavit under penalty of perjury. You actually printed a sworn oath. I swear I have no undisclosed assets. Everything I own is visible and documented. I have nothing to hide from you. He filled out the asset boxes with bold, sweeping strokes, drawing lines through every section for international holdings and offshore trusts, signed his name with a flourish. The associate, wanting to crown herself the architect of the day, pulled a notary stamp from her bag. Since it's a sworn oath, let me make it official for you, she said sweetly, pressing the stamp down beside his signature and signing as the commissioner. The thud of that stamp was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. He pushed it across to me. There, my sworn oath. Now sign mine. I put my hand flat on the page, and then I stopped crying. My shoulders went still. I sat up straight, wiped the fake tears away, and let my face settle into something cold and absolute. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. His smile faltered. The associate slowly lowered her hands. Even the partner sat up. I picked up his heavy pen, pulled the settlement toward me, signed it in one clean line, and slid it back. Then I folded his affidavit, the perjury he'd just handed me, and tucked it into my tote. Thank you for your cooperation, I said, my voice clear and final. I appreciate you putting your lies on the record. I stood and walked out without looking back. 2 days before the hearing, the brother's wife and I met at a quiet cafe out past the city limits, far from anywhere the family went. I arrived in a sharp black coat. The cardigan and the flats were gone. She came in looking like royalty in camel wool and slid into the booth across from me without a flicker of surprise. You clean up well, she said. I always suspected there was a fire under that disguise. And I always knew you were the smartest person at that table, I said. Thank you for the pitcher of water. You handed me the anchor I needed. She leaned in. Then you already know about the laundering, but you don't have the whole picture. You see the money crossing the border. You don't see the rot at home. My husband isn't just an addict losing his allowance. He's in it. They needed someone domestic to wash the cash before it left the country. He runs it through high-stakes underground games and feeds the clean payouts into the shells. Her voice dropped. He skimmed nearly $500,000 last month to cover his own losses. Your husband found out and threatened to hand him to the authorities, or worse, to the clients whose money he stole. So now he's coming after the one thing we have left, my house. I sat up. The home she lived in had been her late father's, an architect, paid off, worth millions, and the deed was in her name. He's working with a crooked notary, probably one the associate found, to forge my signature on a home equity loan, she said, sliding a stack of printed emails across the table. He wants to drain it, wire it offshore to cover his debt, and leave me bankrupt when the bank forecloses. The funds disburse in less than 48 hours. I scanned the forged routing numbers. Sloppy, desperate, full of digital footprints my team could freeze in minutes. I looked up and dropped every pretense. They're not taking $1 from you. I direct a federal forensic unit. I can freeze any domestic account tied to wire fraud in under a minute. I lock that loan down before a cent moves. He'll be left holding forged paper with no way to pay your husband back. Then I leaned in. But I need the ledgers, the physical ones. You said there's a safe? She nodded, a sharp smile breaking. Behind the bookcase on the north wall of the study, it needs his thumbprint, but he's lazy. He set up a manual override code. I watched him punch it in through the hall mirror. She slid a slip of paper across the table with 6 digits on it. Tomorrow my mother-in-law has a charity luncheon at her club. The house will be empty, the alarm off for the cleaners. You'll have 2 hours. That night I had my team execute an emergency freeze on every account tied to her name and flag the incoming loan as fraud. Then I drafted her a brutal, airtight separation petition, stripped her husband of any claims citing the documented gambling and the active fraud file, and couriered it to her. He was neutralized. The next afternoon I parked 2 blocks from the Oakville house, walked in through the gate the cleaners had left open, found the law encyclopedia she'd described, and pulled it. The bookcase swung out. I keyed in the 6 digits and the steel door clunked open. Bundles of cash, jewelry boxes, none of it mattered. At the back sat a single encrypted drive. I took only that, pushed the safe and the bookcase shut, and walked out the way I came, invisible. Back at the office, my team cracked the drive in 14 hours. It was worse than she'd described. Thousands of fraudulent consulting contracts, all bearing the associate's digital signature, all hiding behind solicitor-client privilege, casino payouts matching the brothers' transfers. My husband using his firm clearance to bring the laundered cash back in as clean investment capital, skimming a fee on every transaction, tens of millions cleaned for corrupt clients. A cheating husband hiding assets is a civil matter. This was a syndicate, decades in prison. By dawn the report was bound, the bright seal of the court-appointed special examiner pressed beside my signature. I signed it not as a bookkeeper but with my real credentials, chartered accountant, lead forensic investigator. I had my chief of staff route 1 copy to the family court docket as an emergency discovery exhibit for my hearing, landing on the judge's desk, and transmit the master file to the Financial Crimes Unit and the Tax Authority's Criminal Division. Flagged as an active money laundering and fraud syndicate involving a Bay Street lawyer and a member of his firm. The trap closed. The morning of the hearing, I stood outside the courtroom doors and watched them through the glass. My husband with his legs crossed, whispering something to the associate that made her laugh. His mother rigid in cashmere and diamonds. His brother slouched at the end of the bench, foot tapping, not yet knowing his accounts were already locked. They'd come to watch my execution as a spectator sport. I pushed the doors open. No grey cardigan, no canvas tote. I walked down the center aisle in a tailored charcoal suit, hair pulled back, heels clicking on the marble like a metronome. Every head turned. The laughter died in the associate's throat. My husband's hand dropped from her shoulder, his smug face cracking into confusion. They'd expected a weeping woman begging for 10 grand. They got something else entirely. I went straight through the gate to the respondent's table and set my briefcase down with a solid thud. The judge took her seat, adjusted her glasses, and frowned when she saw me sitting alone. Counsel of record. I buttoned my jacket and stood. I'll be representing myself, Your Honor. Self-represented in all matters. The senior partner shot up with a theatrical scoff. Your Honor, this is a complex high-asset matter involving intricate corporate structures. The respondent is a part-time bookkeeper with no legal training. Her decision to appear on her own is a stalling tactic meant to harass my client. He made a generous $10,000 offer in mediation, which she refused after staging a hysterical breakdown. She cannot comprehend the reality of her situation. I'd ask that her financial claims be dismissed and summary judgment entered for my client. From the gallery, I heard my mother-in-law hum her approval. They thought it was the killing blow. The judge laced her fingers. Mrs. She paused at my surname. Do you have a response before I rule? I unlatched my briefcase. The lock snapped open across the silent room. I lifted out the thick-bound report, the special examiner's seal glowing red on the cover. Your Honor, I'm not here to argue over a $10,000 offer, nor to waste the court's time. I'd like to enter a financial discovery exhibit into evidence. A forensic accounting report concerning the substantial undisclosed and illicit assets of the applicant. The partner laughed, loud and mocking, playing to the room. Your Honor, I object to this circus. My client is a respected partner track lawyer. His disclosures are a matter of verified record. He even signed an affidavit of disclosure to satisfy the respondent's hysteria. Now his unemployed bookkeeper of a wife wants to submit a homemade spreadsheet she printed at a public library. This is exactly the danger of self-represented litigants. She likely watched a documentary on fraud over the weekend and decided to play investigator. He pointed at the bound report the bailiff was carrying up to the bench. This court deals in verified facts. We retain only the gold standard of forensic analysis. We rely on certified federal-level audits from elite, court-appointed oversight bodies, not spiral-bound garbage from a woman who files paperwork for a living. I stood perfectly still and let the irony hang in the cold air. I completely agree with my friend opposite, Your Honor, I said quietly, turning to look the partner in the eye. A court should never rely on fabricated material. It should rely only on verified, legally binding data drawn directly from the Cayman shell companies the applicant currently operates. The word Cayman hit the room like a slap. The laughter in the gallery stopped. I didn't need to turn around to know my husband's smile was gone. The judge picked up the report, her eyes locking on the seal. She read the cover, read my signature beside it, and went very still, the kind of stillness that comes before a storm. The partner, misreading it as disbelief, puffed up to deliver another monologue. The judge took off her glasses and set them down with a soft click. She leaned forward, looking at him with something close to pity. The look you give a man who's stepped onto the tracks in front of a freight train. Counsel, she said, you just spent 5 minutes defending the integrity of court-appointed forensic oversight. You insisted this court rely only on the gold standard of certified investigators. She named my unit. You held them up as beyond reproach. Yes, Your Honor, we trust their methodology completely. She didn't smile. Then I'm puzzled. If your firm relies so heavily on their work and respects their authority as much as you claim, do you truly not recognize the woman standing across from you today? His face froze. He turned and looked at me as if for the first time, taking in the suit, the posture, the cold calm. A flicker of real fear crossed his eyes. Behind me, the whispers stopped. My mother-in-law's fan went still. My husband gripped the railing until his knuckles went white. The judge struck her gavel once. The crack went off like a shot. Let the record reflect that the respondent before this court is not a part-time bookkeeper. She is a chartered professional accountant and the lead forensic investigator of the very unit counsel just praised. She is appearing today in her capacity as a special examiner appointed by the court, and the document she has entered is a verified forensic audit of an active money laundering and fraud syndicate orchestrated by the applicant. The room went into a vacuum of silence. I turned slowly to face the gallery and looked straight at the man who'd thrown my clothes into garbage bags and mocked my salary. The color was gone from his face, his skin gray, his jaw slack. The master of the universe had just realized he'd married the director of a federal financial crimes team and then handed her a notarized, sworn confession on a silver platter. Beside him, the associate's face came apart. She understood now exactly why I'd asked for that disclosure form, what her own golden stamp had done. She wasn't moving into a condo. She was a documented co-conspirator. Her hands shook so hard the stack of files slid off her lap and crashed to the marble, paper everywhere. The partner stood frozen, mouth opening and closing, watching his junior associate and his client drag his whole firm into a criminal file. I didn't give him a second to breathe. Your Honor, as detailed in Section 1, the applicant signed a sworn affidavit during mediation declaring he held no offshore assets. Section 2 contains the decrypted ledgers from his Cayman shells, proving he's laundering over $4 million for corrupt entities. Section 3 outlines the fraudulent consulting contracts used to clean that cash, everyone drafted and signed by his associate, who used her license and his firm's name to hide it all behind privilege. She is not merely the applicant's partner, she is a co-conspirator. The partner recoiled from her like she'd caught fire and threw up his hands. Your Honor, my firm had no knowledge of these activities. We withdraw as counsel effective immediately. The judge didn't even look at him. You committed perjury in my courtroom, she said to my husband, her voice shaking the walls. And you attempted to use the family court system to conceal an international laundering operation. She nodded to the officers by the doors, who I'd coordinated with before I ever walked into the building. Take them into custody. They crossed the room in seconds. One spun my husband against the table and the cuffs clicked shut around his wrists. He didn't fight, just stood there, hollowed out by shock. The associate dropped to her knees, sobbing. Please, I'm a lawyer, not anymore, the judge said coldly. I'm forwarding this report to the Law Society with my recommendation for your immediate disbarment. You'll never practice in this country again. Across the gallery, reality hit the brother. He shoved past his mother and bolted for the back doors. He didn't make 3 steps. His wife stepped gracefully into the aisle, blocking him, regal in emerald, and slapped a thick stack of sealed documents against his chest. You're not going anywhere, she said, smooth and lethal. Those are your separation papers. Attached is a court order freezing every account, every credit line, and the forged home equity loan you tried to take against my house yesterday. You have nothing to your name. You can't even afford a bus ticket out of here. He stared at the freeze order, his escape evaporating. And my mother-in-law, the woman who'd spent the morning sneering at me, let out a long, horrified wail and sagged against the bench, clutching her chest as she watched both her golden sons destroyed in the span of 5 minutes. I didn't stay to watch them led out. I closed my briefcase with a soft click, turned my back on the screaming and the weeping, and walked down the center aisle. The brother's wife fell into step beside me. We pushed through the heavy doors and out into the bright cold afternoon, the kind of clean winter light that makes the whole city look scrubbed and new. And for the first time in 4 years, I could breathe all the way down. If you've ever had someone mistake your silence for weakness, here's what that whole mess taught me. Arrogance blinds people to exactly what's standing in front of them. They mistook my quiet for stupidity and my patience for defeat, and the truth is that real power never has to raise its voice. While they shouted about how superior they were, I just gathered facts and I let their own certainty make them careless. Your worth is never decided by how cruelly someone treats you. When you actually know what you're capable of, you stop needing approval from the people trying to tear you down. I didn't let my anger drive the car. I let it sit in the passenger seat while my head did the work, and I turned every assumption they made into the thing that buried them. The best revenge isn't matching someone's cruelty. It's outthinking them, taking back every bit of power they thought they had over you and walking out the door free. Let me know down in the comments if you've ever had to quietly outsmart someone who underestimated exactly who you were. The thing that stays with me isn't the cuffs clicking shut or the color leaving his face. It's how ordinary the whole undoing was. Nothing supernatural happened in that courtroom. Every single thing that buried him was something he chose with his own hand while he thought he was winning. He emptied the accounts, so he put his name on every dollar. He claimed the condo alone, so he claimed the lien alone. He signed a sworn oath swearing he had nothing to hide, and the notary stamp came down on his own lie. I didn't trap him so much as hand him a pen and let his arrogance do the writing. That's how cause and effect actually works in real life. It's slow and it's quiet, and it almost always traces straight back to the choices a person makes when they think no one's paying attention. What kept me steady through those weeks wasn't anger, though I had plenty. It was three things I'd had to build over a long time, and I think anyone watching can build them too. The first is a clean conscience, the decision to win without becoming the kind of person who threw my clothes into garbage bags. I never lied to the court. I never forged a thing. I let his own documents speak because the truth, properly assembled, is heavier than any insult. The second is the patience to keep learning and to keep thinking when everyone around you is shouting. While they performed a certainty at that dinner table and in that boardroom, I just gathered facts and let them get careless. A sharp, well kept mind is the one asset nobody can freeze or take off the title. And the third is the staying power to sit inside humiliation without flinching, wine soaking through my cardigan, my mother in law calling me a charity case, and not give them the reaction they were starving for. Endurance isn't loud. Sometimes it just looks like keeping your face still for one more minute. The brother's wife understood all three of those things, which is why she was the only one not laughing. She'd been treated like cargo too, and instead of breaking, she handed me a pitcher of spilled water and a 6-digit code and walked out of that house with her father's home and her dignity intact. If you take anything from what happened to me, let it be this. Your worth was never up for a vote at someone else's table. The people who underestimate you are usually telling you more about their own blind spots than about your limits. Don't spend your life arguing with them. Become so quietly capable, so honest, and so hard to rattle that the day they finally see you clearly is the day it's already too late for them to do anything about it. Then pick up your locket off the floor and walk out into the clean, cold air.